What's poppin', guys? This video is going to be a tad different than normal. This one is a compilation of all the shorts that I've been working on while building the Wolf Army. Now, the goal was to get this finished before they released the Space Wolves for GW, which turned out to be successful. I did kick their ass because I got my Wolf Army done, and I have more than what you will get in the box. But without further ado, I'm going to let each one of my shorts play, and then if I feel like I want to add something a little to the short, explain why I made the decision that I did, I will add a bit at the end. Anyways, let's get into this. Welcome back to a new series called Let's Learn How to Give Chapters Personalities Games Workshop. That's why this series is going to document every single step I take. Look at this guy. This guy is bland and boring. Look at this guy. This is the guy she tells you not to worry about. In these next few series of shorts, we're going to go through step by step kit bashing and adding a significant amount of personality to each member of this army, hopefully showing you tips and tricks. Let's get into this second episode. We're going to start off by stripping the paint. This is a pretty simple process. You're going to want to stick that sumbitch in some isopropyl alcohol. Prep for the next few steps. We're adding the uniqueness here through the 3D printed bits. Simply brush the paint off with a toothbrush. We're starting off by getting rid of that nasty helmet. Working with resin demands we use super glue. We can keep the same pose but make the miniature more interesting by giving this guy a more interesting weapon. Space Wolves are known for being idiots with no helmets and beards. We're going to be finishing this guy up with some 3D printed shoulder pads. A lot of people have talked about how I shouldn't have used 3D printing in this. But really, 3D printing is one of the easiest ways, and it's a lot cheaper than going for actual bits off of eBay. Furthermore, places like Etsy and eBay have a lot of 3D printed bits, so even if you don't have a 3D printer, you can get these 3D bits easily. That's why I was completely comfortable with majority of these guys getting 3D. Somehow Games Workshop is allergic to making these guys Vikings. Addicted to making the Space Wolves always have a wolf motif, even though they're supposed to be Vikings in space, and that's what I'm really going for with this guy. Remove a lot of the normal iconography, make it a bit more looking like a Mark II set of armor. I did this by removing the chest Aquila, making sure I added fur to him, and then making sure when I was selecting helmets, I decided to use a Mark II helmet instead of one of their ridiculous wolf helmets that they constantly insist that the whole squad needs to have, even though literally only one of them, if not none, should have a wolf helmet because they're not wolves, they're Vikings. That's the whole point of these guys, is they're Vikings. I definitely think this guy is a lot more interesting than most of the other guys. And the reason why I really gave a lot of customization into these first few guys is because I wanted to make a unit of, Grey Wolves. So I thought giving them a bunch of custom gear would be more unique. I mean, this guy is carrying an axe from a Chaos Corn Berserker. Furthermore, I wanted to simulate more aggression rather than the animalistic tendency we see. Don't get me wrong, I like one or two wolf helmets, I like some of the wolf iconography, but I feel like a lot of times Games Workshop focuses more on the wolf rather than the Viking, and it really puts a lot of people off the Space Wolves. So I was honing in and targeting, and this is a big part of kit bashing, is what do you want to do with the army? Let's get into this again. The next thing you can do to make your kit bashes a bit more unique and your armies a bit more unique is changing up the weapons. This is pretty simple, and something that Games Workshop seems to not understand. I just start off by chopping off his blade and then running my own to clean it up. Then obviously I removed the backpack and helmet, after which I added an embossed shoulder pad. and then added an actual unique weapon, that being an axe. Whether this is an ice blade or a power axe, it doesn't really matter, it's a unique axe. Then I added a unique headpiece. Really, the whole issue here is that not enough pieces are unique. I finished up with a unique backpack, and he's ready to go. Here I wanted to highlight just how a simple weapon change oftentimes will make things a lot easier. So for example, if I switched out the chain swords with frost axes, I could still run them like I do in the game without changing the rules, but visually they look different, which is something Games Workshop doesn't really do. And they're actually doing less of it. I mean, they're actively removing uniqueness in weapons. I mean, recently they've essentially give everything heirloom weapon that's specialized, instead of having unique data sheets for everything. But I don't really feel like switching out chain sword for frost weapons on an intercessor unit would really change much, but it gives a lot of visual difference. Therefore, literally doing these simple things of like switching out chain swords for chain spears and keeping them with the same weapons profile just adds more flair to the miniatures and separates every single Space Marine army from looking the same. The next lesson we're going to be learning today: how to become ungovernable. I'm talking growing corn in your front lawn. Blood for the blood god! Blood for the blood god! Blood for the blood god! Most multi-part Dreadnought kits only come with one chassis. Always have blood. Yours or theirs. We're gonna do this by 3D printing. Initially we built Murderfang. There's a plethora of parts left in this kit. All I needed to do was 3D print an old chassis and some legs, and I just strapped the parts to him. I got a completely new Dreadnought out of this old kit. I think this was one of the most important videos that I've worked on, is sort of telling people that there is these chassis that you can get off of different websites, because a lot of the old kits are no longer being supported, and pretty much all the old Dreadnoughts are going out the window. Even old box knots for Heresy are being replaced, and that's kind of sad because the box knot, I would argue, is the most iconic Dreadnought, and it's what made Dreadnoughts popular. All they really needed to do is like take the exact same model and then reportion them out to fit the new scale, and it would have worked fine. But God forbid Games Workshop uses anything iconic.
And forcefully demonstrate to designers how they might create compelling new lines out of what amounted to a contradictory brief. Make it new, but keep it classic. It was a back-to-the-future moment.
Therefore, I wanted to keep the iconic box knot within this army. I decided to try to use the 3D printed chassis to start pulling off all the pieces off the sprue to build several Dreadnoughts for the army. I pretty much made 2 Dreadnoughts for this army for the price of 1, and I have the possibility of making the 3rd, and I have a possibility of making a 3rd one. One of the biggest elements I feel like the Wolves have lost over the years is this idea of like pushing the edge, being just a little bit renegade, as far as we can push this envelope to see how much we can get away with. I'm using an old Chaos head. That's also why I'm trying to lean into this Mark V feel. Yeah, I'm using a few Primaris bits, but stuff like the shoulder pad particularly gives off a Mark V feel with how the studs are laying on it. Obviously, I'm trying to get a bit of a Firstborn feel. That's why I'm using this claw that can be found in a Firstborn kit. This claw, quite frankly, also looks very chaotic, further pushing that renegade motif that can be found within the 13th Company. After slapping on a Firstborn bag onto this guy, he's pretty much ready to go. So it's up to you. Tell me, do you think I've achieved the look of the 13th Company? This is where I get a massive confusion within lore. As many of you know, and some of you who know me privately, I am really deep into Warhammer lore. So what the fudge is going on with the 13th Company. Because you have the 13th Great Company that went into the warp with Leman Russ that comes back out on Cadia, and then you have another 13th Company made up of wolves. I was trying to simulate, the 13th Company, Great Company that went in to the warp with Leman Russ, and that's why I used a few heresy bits and the really, really old retro head that I got from a Chaos Brew. This whole time the wolves have been missing something so iconic to them that they can't be seen without it. For a faction that are supposedly furries, there seems to be a massive lack of fur. This is when we use our cheat code. This is a modeling compound called green stuff. We're going to sculpt this onto the miniature. The first way I did it was to slap on a bunch of green stuff and then texture it in. The next way I did it, in the more precise way that I think looks better but is way harder to achieve, is making little tubes and placing them on the miniature. If you pair this up with some of the other 3D prints we've been using, you're going to get something that looks way closer to Firstborn. This was probably the hardest part of this project. I've never done extensive green stuff modeling before, and when I tried to 3D print cloth, none of them would ever fit. So I decided to try to do it by hand. And the way I did it, I really would advise not to do for beginners. Just texture it, especially at the small scale. Nobody's going to notice the difference between putting each individual hair and just carving into it. Furthermore, as I've talked to more people, apparently adding milliput and green stuff makes a much better compound. But I'm also very inexperienced with green stuff, and I'm not going to be doing anything anytime soon. Furthermore, I also should have added some Vaseline. I was only using water, which made it even more temperamental. Games Workshop finally did it. They beat me to a model. To those who might not know, the wolves kind of have a special apothecary. Because of this, I just decided to do another unique thing. This is the wolves' special chaplain. I also focused on pinning in this episode. It's a pretty simple process. All you can do is take a drill, then a piece of paperclip and put it in. This is a very important process to kitbashing that I feel like everybody who's learning how to kitbash knows. This was actually funny because I literally filmed this, making this guy right before heading to the convention. And when I got to the convention, I found out they were releasing him. So I had to quickly think of, like, what new role should he have? Because originally he was supposed to be the special apothecary, but I decided to now make him the special chaplain. So hopefully they don't release another chaplain and make this guy obsolete in this army that I just built. I made them out of the Judiciar. It's one of those units that was very popular a few editions ago, but not very popular now. Personally, I don't really understand the point of him, so I decided to just kitbash him. This one was kind of interesting because it was a old project that I never finished. It was supposed to be like the idea is modern, like an alternate universe where the Chaos Legion stayed loyal. But as I was doing more and more of it, I'm like, I don't really enjoy this. So it sat on the bench until I noticed it while building the new Blood Claws list. And I was like, wait a minute, this is going to work perfect. So I threw him in, and I wanted to highlight how you can use more renegade parts from Heresy and lean into the wolf aesthetic. Furthermore, I was trying to highlight the aggression of the young ones compared to sort of the unaggressive nature of Grey Wolf. Sadly, the Space Wolf project is winding down. But we still have a few more episodes left, so I decided to imbue you with one of the most important rules and philosophies I use while making these models. That is simply try to add as much character as possible. Oftentimes, Space Marines are accused of being very bland. This is simply not true. The issue is every person's army looks the same. This is why I took the Blood Claw Sergeant. These are a unit known for close combat, so I gave them 2 blades. But then I'm like, how do I highlight him having 2 blades? Well, I'm gonna give him an extra helmet. This is his old helmet, and he's now wearing his mentor's helmet. This adds to his personality and gives it a unique story. I wanted to highlight pinning with this episode because pinning is something that's really hard to understand at first, and for the first sort of like 2 years, I never pinned anything. I almost just tried to superglue everything. So this model, on every chance I could, I tried to pin him somewhere to just highlight how important pinning is to kitbashing. Sadly, this series is coming to an end. It's up to you guys to decide. Would you rather get a full video of me painting them, or continue this series by continuing the shorts? As I make the Wolf Leader, you can decide. This guy was very interesting for me. I was trying to emulate the new aesthetics that they're releasing with the new update of Space Wolves. Thus, I decided to change his shield from the holding position into a new position. I also was inspired by the company Champion in putting a bolter with his shield. Further, pulling with this Firstborn aesthetic, I decided to use Firstborn helmets in Firstborn weaponry, mixing this Blade Guard veteran look with a raw Viking aesthetic. I also think dramatically shifting the pose like I did helped a lot with distinguishing this model from the OG counterpart. Well, that was the series. I know this seems like kind of a short series, but really I focused on making sure the characters of this army was unique. Furthermore, this is a starting army and is comparable to what you're going to get in the So in this army, I have the Apothecary, and his equivalent would be the Chaplain that I made. I have the Headhunter. Instead of making 3 blade vets, I decided to do the Dreadnought, but they're close together in points. And then I have 2 10-man units, one of Grey Hunters and one of Bloodclaw, which is what you get in this box. So, my goal for beating Games Workshop was succeeded. I created a box that was the same size as theirs for an army for somebody to start, and highlighted how kitbashing can easily do the same thing as they do.